Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Lies. Robert "Rob" Griffin had always prided himself on being a man who built things to last. At 42, he owned Griffin Security Solutions, a thriving private security firm that protected high-profile clients throughout Chicago. His steel-gray eyes and imposing 6'3" frame commanded respect in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Rob had learned early in life that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, except when it came to his family. The Victorian house in Lincoln Park stood as a testament to his success. Rob had purchased it 12 years ago, shortly after marrying Amanda, his college sweetheart. She was everything he thought he wanted, blonde, petite, with an infectious laugh that had first caught his attention during a Northwestern University football game. Amanda came from old money. The Whitmore family had connections stretching back to Chicago's founding fathers. Their children were Rob's pride and joy. 15-year-old Emma was brilliant, already taking advanced placement courses and showing interest in forensic science. 12-year-old Tyler was the athlete, excelling in baseball and inheriting what Rob assumed was his own competitive drive. 8-year-old Sophie was the baby, artistic and sensitive, always drawing pictures of their perfect family. What Rob didn't know was that Amanda had been systematically betraying him for over 8 years. It started innocently enough. Amanda had reconnected with Kyle Morrison, her high school boyfriend, through social media when Sophie was just 6 months old. Kyle was everything Rob wasn't, smooth-talking, effortlessly charming, and unemployed more often than not. He worked sporadically as a personal trainer and bartender, living off his trust fund and various women who found his perpetual bad boy act irresistible. Amanda told herself it was just friendship at first. Coffee meetings turned into lunch dates, which evolved into afternoon encounters at Kyle's downtown loft. By the time Sophie turned 2, Amanda was deeply entangled in an affair that would eventually consume her marriage entirely. Kyle had a particular talent for manipulation. He understood Amanda's frustrations with Rob's long work hours and demanding personality. While Rob built his business empire, Kyle whispered sweet lies about how Amanda deserved better, how she was too special to be trapped in a suburban life with a man who valued security over spontaneity. The affair wasn't just emotional, it was vindictive. Kyle encouraged Amanda to see Rob as the enemy, the obstacle standing between her and true happiness. They began meeting in their own home when Rob traveled for business. Kyle would use Rob's shower, eat his food, sleep in his bed, and corrupt his children's mother just feet away from their innocent bedrooms. Rob, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to provide for his family. His security firm had expanded to include corporate espionage prevention, personal protection for celebrities, and consultation for law enforcement. He employed former military personnel, ex-cops, and intelligence operatives. His network of contacts stretched from City Hall to the FBI's Chicago field office. Every night, Rob came home expecting to find his sanctuary. Amanda played her part perfectly, the devoted wife who had dinner ready, helped with homework, and maintained their social calendar. She was a master actress, able to compartmentalize her double life with disturbing ease. The children, unknowing pawns in their mother's deception, began unconsciously picking up Kyle's mannerisms and phrases. Emma started using expressions that Rob didn't recognize. Tyler developed a casual attitude toward authority that seemed foreign to Rob's military-influenced parenting style. Sophie drew pictures of a mysterious friend who visited when Daddy was away. Rob attributed these changes to normal childhood development, never suspecting that another man was actively influencing his children's upbringing. Amanda made sure Kyle was always gone before Rob returned from trips, covering her tracks with practiced precision. But Amanda and Kyle weren't content with just the affair. They began planning for a future together, one that would leave Rob devastated and financially ruined. Amanda started documenting Rob's long work hours, his occasional displays of temper when stressed, and his strict parenting style. She was building a case for divorce that would paint her as the neglected wife and him as the absent, controlling husband. Kyle pushed for more aggressive moves. He suggested Amanda access Rob's business accounts, gather information about his clients, and create evidence of emotional abuse. Together, they developed a timeline for leaving Rob that would maximize Amanda's financial settlement and ensure she retained primary custody of the children. The irony wasn't lost on Kyle that he was plotting against a man whose profession was literally protecting people from threats like himself. But Rob's expertise in external security made him blind to the enemy already inside his walls. As Emma approached her 16th birthday, Amanda decided it was time to accelerate their plans. She and Kyle began discussing how to reveal the truth in a way that would completely destroy Rob's sense of reality. They wanted more than just a divorce. They wanted to watch him crumble. The idea for the birthday prank came to Kyle during one of their afternoon sessions. He had always been cruel, but this suggestion revealed a level of sadism that even Amanda hadn't fully grasped. Yet she went along with it, too invested in their fantasy future to consider the devastating consequences for everyone involved. They decided to wait for Rob's birthday in April, timing their revelation for maximum psychological impact. The plan was simple but brutal. Let Rob believe he was celebrating another year of his perfect life, then destroy everything he thought he knew about himself and his family. As April approached, Rob noticed Amanda seemed unusually excited about his birthday plans. She insisted on keeping everything a surprise, claiming she wanted to make this birthday extra special. Rob, touched by what he perceived as renewed attention from his wife, looked forward to the celebration with genuine anticipation. He had no idea he was walking into an ambush that would shatter his world and unleash a side of him that Amanda and Kyle couldn't possibly imagine. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The weeks leading up to Rob's birthday were filled with what he later realized were carefully orchestrated moments of deception. Amanda seemed more affectionate than she had been in months, initiating conversations about their future together, making plans for summer vacation. Rob, starved for connection with his wife, eagerly embraced what he thought was a rekindling of their romance. During this time, Kyle Morrison was making himself increasingly comfortable in Rob's life. He had convinced Amanda to introduce him as her old friend who needed a place to stay while apartment hunting. Rob, whose success had made him generous and whose work kept him frequently absent, agreed to let Kyle stay in their guest room for a few weeks. Kyle's presence in the house was a calculated psychological assault. He made subtle comments about Rob's parenting style, questioned his business decisions, and gradually positioned himself as the more understanding, available male figure. The children, particularly Tyler, began seeking Kyle's approval and advice. Emma, now 15 and more perceptive than her younger siblings, sensed something was wrong but couldn't articulate it. She noticed how her mother's behavior changed when Kyle was around. Amanda became giggly and animated in ways that seemed forced. Emma also observed that Kyle had an unsettling way of looking at her mother, like he owned something precious. Rob's business was experiencing significant growth during this period. He had just signed a major contract to provide security consulting for a high-profile corruption investigation involving city officials and organized crime figures. The case required extensive background checks, surveillance operations, and coordination with federal investigators. Ironically, while Rob was helping expose other people's secrets and betrayals, he remained oblivious to the conspiracy unfolding in his own home. His expertise in detecting deception was neutralized by his fundamental trust in Amanda and his assumption that his family was his safe harbor. Kyle, meanwhile, was gathering intelligence on Rob's business operations. He photographed documents left on Rob's home office desk, memorized the names of key clients, and even managed to overhear several sensitive phone conversations. Kyle's plan extended beyond just stealing Rob's wife. He intended to use inside information to damage Rob's professional reputation as well. Amanda provided Kyle with access to Rob's personal files, including tax returns, bank statements, and legal documents. They discovered that Rob's wealth was even more substantial than Amanda had realized. Griffin Security Solutions was valued at over $8 million, and Rob's real estate investments and retirement accounts pushed his net worth well into seven figures. This revelation made Kyle even more motivated to pursue their plan. He began pressuring Amanda to move faster, arguing that Rob might discover their affair before they could maximize their financial advantage. Kyle's growing greed and impatience started to create tension between the lovers, but Amanda was too invested in their scheme to back down. During this period, Rob made a decision that would later prove crucial. He installed a comprehensive security system throughout the house. Ostensibly for protection, given his high-profile clients, the system included hidden cameras in common areas and sophisticated audio recording capabilities. Rob informed Amanda about the obvious security features but kept the hidden surveillance to himself, a precaution born from his professional paranoia. The cameras captured everything: Amanda and Kyle's intimate conversations, their detailed planning sessions, and their mockery of Rob's trusting nature. Kyle's true character was revealed in these recordings as he described increasingly elaborate ways to humiliate and destroy Rob. Amanda, rather than being horrified by Kyle's cruelty, seemed energized by it. Rob's assistant, Patricia Holmes, a sharp-eyed former detective who had worked with Rob for 6 years, began noticing changes in her boss. Rob seemed distracted, asking her to take on more responsibilities while he focused on what he called personal matters. Patricia, whose investigative instincts remained sharp, suspected something was wrong but respected Rob's privacy. Meanwhile, the children were experiencing their own confusion and distress. Emma found herself caught between loyalty to her father and her growing awareness that something fundamental was wrong with their family dynamic. Tyler, influenced by Kyle's casual attitude toward rules and responsibility, began acting out at school and challenging Rob's authority at home. Sophie, the most sensitive of the three, started having nightmares and became clingy with Rob whenever he was home. She couldn't understand why the house felt different when the friend was there, but she instinctively sought comfort from her father during this period of instability. Rob attributed the children's behavioral changes to typical teenage and childhood phases. His demanding work schedule prevented him from spending enough time at home to recognize the deeper patterns of disruption that Kyle's presence was creating. As April approached, Amanda and Kyle finalized their plans for the birthday revelation. They decided to involve the children directly, using them as weapons in their psychological assault. Amanda convinced Emma to help with this special surprise, framing the birthday prank as a harmless joke that would make Daddy laugh. Kyle suggested they record Rob's reaction to the DNA test revelation, planning to use the footage to humiliate him further during divorce proceedings. Amanda agreed, excited by the prospect of having visual proof of Rob's emotional destruction. The final piece of their plan involved timing the revelation for maximum legal and financial advantage. Amanda had already consulted with a divorce attorney, using a false name and paying in cash. She learned exactly how to position herself as the wrong party and how to ensure she received the largest possible settlement. What neither Amanda nor Kyle realized was that Rob had spent decades preparing for betrayal, not from his family, but from business associates, clients, and adversaries. His security protocols, trust verification methods, and contingency planning were second nature. While they plotted against him, Rob was unconsciously employing the same instincts that had made him successful in his professional life. 3 days before his birthday, Rob discovered evidence of financial irregularities in one of his business accounts, small withdrawals that appeared to be unauthorized. His immediate suspicion fell on a recently fired employee, and he began a discreet investigation. This investigation would lead him to review his home security footage, setting the stage for a discovery that would change everything. The birthday trap was set, but Rob Griffin was about to prove that the most dangerous man to cross is one who builds his life on the assumption that everyone is a potential threat. Everyone except the family he trusts completely. Chapter 3. The Revelation. April 15th dawned with Amanda barely containing her nervous excitement. She had spent the morning preparing Rob's special birthday breakfast while Kyle remained strategically absent from the house. The children were in on what they believed was an elaborate surprise that would make their father happy. Emma had been reluctant to participate, but Amanda convinced her it was just a harmless prank. Rob arrived home from his morning workout to find his family gathered in the kitchen, grinning with barely suppressed excitement. The scene looked perfect. His beautiful wife, his 3 children, and an elaborate birthday spread complete with his favorite coffee and homemade pancakes. "Happy birthday, Dad," Sophie squealed, throwing her arms around his waist. Tyler and Emma added their congratulations, and Amanda kissed him with what seemed like genuine affection. The morning proceeded normally as Rob opened presents from the children, a new watch from Emma, a baseball signed by his favorite player from Tyler, and a hand-drawn portrait of the family from Sophie. Amanda saved her gift for last, presenting him with a coffee mug wrapped in elegant paper. "This one's special," Amanda said, her eyes bright with anticipation. The kids helped pick it out. Rob unwrapped the mug to reveal "World's Best Dad," printed in bold letters. He smiled, genuinely touched by the sentiment, and pulled Amanda into a warm embrace. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is perfect." "Read the bottom," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying a strange note that Rob would later recognize as reluctant participation. Rob turned the mug over to find tiny letters printed on the base. "April Fools, you're not our dad." For a moment, Rob stared at the words, his brain refusing to process their meaning. He looked up at his family, expecting to see sheepish grins and hear them shout, "Just kidding." Instead, he found Amanda's face transformed by an expression he had never seen before, cold, calculating, and oddly triumphant. "I don't understand," Rob said slowly, still holding the mug. Amanda reached into a manila envelope she had kept beside her chair and withdrew 3 DNA test results. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "All 3 kids belong to my ex-boyfriend," she announced, the words hanging in the air like poison gas. The silence that followed was broken only by Sophie's confused whimper. Tyler looked between his parents with growing alarm, while Emma stared at the floor, clearly regretting her participation in what she now understood was not a harmless prank. Rob's mind, trained by years of crisis management and threat assessment, went completely blank for several seconds. Then, with mechanical precision, he set down the mug and extended his hand for the DNA results. The documents were professionally prepared, comparing his DNA profile with each child's. The results were unambiguous. Probability of paternity, 0%. Rob Griffin was not the biological father of Emma, Tyler, or Sophie. "How long?" Rob asked, his voice unnaturally calm. "Emma was 6 months old when Kyle and I reconnected," Amanda said, her earlier nervousness replaced by what appeared to be relief. "Tyler and Sophie, they've always been his." Rob looked at his children, or rather, the children he had raised, loved, and considered his own for 15 years. Emma was crying silently. Tyler looked like he might be sick. Sophie clung to her mother's leg, sensing that something terrible was happening but not understanding what. "Where is he?" Rob asked. "Kyle? He's—" Amanda paused, realizing she was about to reveal more than she intended. "Here," came a voice from the kitchen doorway. Kyle Morrison stepped into view, leaning casually against the doorframe with a smug expression that Rob would remember for the rest of his life. "Surprise, Rob." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. The house guest, the children's changing behavior, Amanda's recent mood swings, and secretive phone calls. Rob had been living with his wife's lover, supporting him, feeding him, and providing him with unlimited access to destroy their family from within. Rob stood slowly, his considerable frame casting a shadow across the kitchen table. Kyle, despite his bravado, unconsciously took a step back. There was something in Rob's eyes that triggered a primal survival instinct. "Rob, please," Amanda started, but he held up a hand for silence. "Kids, go to your rooms," Rob said quietly. "But Dad," Tyler began. "Go to your rooms." The command was delivered with military precision that brooked no argument. The children scattered, Emma helping guide a sobbing Sophie upstairs. Once they were alone, Rob turned his attention to Kyle. "You've been living in my house For 3 months, Kyle replied with a grin. Nice place. Great shower pressure. Rob's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained eerily controlled. And you've been fucking my wife in my bed. Among other places, Kyle said, his arrogance overwhelming his survival instincts. She's quite enthusiastic when she's not pretending to be the perfect suburban housewife. Amanda looked horrified by Kyle's crudeness, but it was too late to control the situation now. Rob nodded slowly, processing this information with the same methodical approach he used for complex security assessments. I see. He walked to his home office, leaving Amanda and Kyle in the kitchen. They heard him making a phone call, his voice too low to make out the words. When he returned 5 minutes later, he was carrying a briefcase. Amanda, you're going to receive an email within the hour, Rob said. I suggest you read it carefully. What kind of email? She asked, her newfound confidence beginning to waver. Divorce papers, custody petitions, fraud charges. The usual documentation when someone discovers they've been systematically robbed and betrayed for 8 years. Kyle laughed. Good luck proving fraud, old man. Amanda's been the perfect wife and mother. Any court will see that. Rob turned to Kyle with the kind of smile that had made hardened criminals nervous during his law enforcement consulting work. Kyle Morrison, born August 12, 1981. Last known address before moving into my guest room was a studio apartment in Wicker Park, evicted 3 months ago for non-payment. Current employment status, unemployed. Trust fund depleted as of December 2023 due to gambling debts. Kyle's smirk faded. How do you? Criminal history includes 2 DUIs, 1 domestic violence charge that was dropped, and 3 restraining orders filed by former girlfriends. Most recently, Sarah Chun, who you stalked for 6 months after she ended your relationship. Amanda stared at Kyle in shock. These details had never come up in their conversations. I run a security firm, Kyle. Background checks are what I do for a living. Rob opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. This is everything about you going back to high school. Your relationship patterns, your financial irresponsibility, your propensity for violence when you don't get your way. Rob turned to Amanda. And this folder contains documentation of every lie you've told me over the past 8 years. Every fake girls' night out. Every fabricated work obligation. Every time you used our children as alibis while you were betraying our family. Amanda's face had gone pale. You've been spying on us? I've been protecting my assets, Rob corrected. Something I should have done more thoroughly years ago. Kyle stepped forward aggressively. You can't prove anything, and you can't stop us from being together. Amanda loves me, not you. Rob's smile widened. Kyle, do you know what I discovered when I reviewed the footage from my security cameras this morning? The blood drained from Kyle's face. Everything. Your planning sessions. Your mockery of my trust. Your detailed discussions about how to destroy me financially and emotionally. Your suggestions about using my children as weapons. Rob paused. And your confession to several felonies, including identity theft and credit card fraud. Amanda sank into a chair, the full scope of their exposure beginning to dawn on her. But here's my favorite part, Rob continued, his voice gaining an edge that made Kyle unconsciously step back again. Your detailed plan to humiliate me with this birthday surprise, including your intention to record my reaction and use it against me in court. Rob reached into his briefcase and withdrew a tablet, showing them a freeze frame of themselves from the previous evening, clearly identifiable as they discussed their final preparations. Guess what, Kyle? I've been recording too. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Sophie crying upstairs. Rob closed his briefcase and headed for the door. Where are you going? Amanda called after him. Rob paused in the doorway. To destroy you both. Completely and permanently. The front door closed behind him with a finality that made Amanda realize she had just awakened something in her husband that she never knew existed, and that Kyle had seriously underestimated the man whose life they had chosen to demolish. Within 30 minutes, Amanda's phone buzzed with an email notification. The message was from Rob's attorney and contained legal documents that would begin the systematic dismantling of everything she thought she had gained through her betrayal. But that was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Architect of Ruin. Rob drove to his office in downtown Chicago with the methodical calm of a man who had just shifted from victim to predator. The emotional devastation of the morning's revelation was contained in a locked compartment of his mind, set aside while he focused on what he did best: systematic problem-solving and strategic retaliation. Griffin Security Solutions occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in the River North District. Rob's employees were accustomed to handling sensitive situations, but what their boss was about to unleash would test the limits of their professional discretion. Patricia Holmes was waiting in Rob's office when he arrived, her weathered face showing concern. As his right hand and former Chicago PD detective, Patricia had an intuitive understanding of when situations were about to become complicated. "The background check on Kyle Morrison is on your desk," she said without preamble, "along with some additional information you didn't request, but probably need to know." Rob settled behind his mahogany desk and opened the comprehensive file Patricia had compiled. Kyle's history was worse than even Rob had suspected. Beyond the criminal record and financial irresponsibility, Patricia had uncovered a pattern of predatory behavior toward wealthy women, psychological manipulation, and what appeared to be a systematic approach to infiltrating and destroying stable relationships. "He's done this before," Patricia observed, "3 times in the past 10 years. Always targets married women with significant assets. The relationships follow an identical pattern: emotional manipulation, affair, encouragement of divorce, and then disappearance once the financial settlements are finalized." Rob absorbed this information without visible emotion. What happened to the previous targets? 2 divorces resulted in substantial settlements that Kyle helped spin into bankruptcy. The third woman, Jennifer Walsh, committed suicide 6 months after Kyle disappeared with her money. The temperature in the office seemed to drop 10 degrees. Patricia had worked with Rob long enough to recognize the look that crossed his face, the same expression he wore when dealing with threats to his high-profile clients. "Give me everything on Jennifer Walsh. Medical records, police reports, witness statements." "And Patricia?" Rob looked up from the file. "This is now a Priority 1 investigation. Full resources." "What's the assignment?" Patricia asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Total destruction. Legal, financial, social, and psychological. I want Kyle Morrison and my wife to understand what happens when someone mistakes my kindness for weakness." Patricia nodded grimly. She had been waiting for someone to make this mistake. "What about the kids?" For the first time that day, Rob's composure cracked slightly. "They're victims in this, but they're also not mine, and Amanda's going to learn that actions have consequences that extend beyond just her own life." Rob spent the next 4 hours with his senior team, laying out a comprehensive strategy that would utilize every aspect of his firm's capabilities. His employees included former FBI agents, retired military intelligence officers, ex-prosecutors, and specialists in financial forensics. What they were about to undertake went far beyond standard divorce proceedings. The first phase involved legal maneuvering. Rob's attorney, Martin Kellerman, had already filed emergency motions for asset protection, immediate separation, and full custody pending DNA verification. But Kellerman was also implementing more aggressive strategies designed to expose Amanda's adultery in the most damaging ways possible. "We're filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and emotional cruelty," Kellerman explained during their afternoon meeting. "The DNA evidence, combined with your security footage, gives us an overwhelming case. Amanda will be lucky to receive minimal support, and Kyle can be charged with several felonies." "That's not enough," Rob replied. "I want them to wish they had never been born." The second phase involved financial warfare. Rob's forensic accountants discovered that Amanda had been slowly siphoning money from their joint accounts to fund her lifestyle with Kyle. More damaging, she had used Rob's business credit cards to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts for her lover. But Rob's most devastating discovery came from his cybersecurity team. Kyle had been using Rob's home internet to access his own accounts, leaving a digital trail that revealed the full scope of his criminal activities. Kyle had been running credit card scams, identity theft operations, and online fraud schemes, all from Rob's house, potentially implicating Rob in federal crimes. He's been using your home as his base of operations for multiple felonies, explained Marcus Chun, Rob's head of cybersecurity. We have evidence of over $200,000 in fraudulent transactions, all traceable to IP addresses from your home network. Rob smiled for the first time that day. That gives us leverage. The third phase was psychological warfare, and this was where Rob's skills as a security consultant became truly dangerous. He understood how to identify vulnerabilities, exploit weaknesses, and create maximum psychological pressure. Kyle Morrison thought he was dealing with a cuckolded suburban husband. He had no idea he was now the target of a man who had spent 2 decades learning how to neutralize threats from every angle. Rob's investigation revealed that Kyle's mother, Dorothy Morrison, was a devout Catholic living in a retirement community in Florida. She believed her son was a successful business consultant and sent him monthly checks from her Social Security to help with his investments. Kyle had been lying to his elderly mother for years while stealing her limited income. Amanda's parents, the prestigious Whitmore family, had never fully approved of Rob's working-class background. They tolerated him because of his success, but they had always hoped Amanda would find someone more suitable. They had no idea their daughter was destroying her marriage for a criminal who was using their family name to run con games. Both Kyle and Amanda had vulnerabilities that could be exploited through their social circles, professional contacts, and family relationships. Rob began planning a systematic campaign to expose them in every sphere of their lives. As the day progressed, Rob received regular updates on Amanda and Kyle's activities. His surveillance team reported that they had spent the afternoon at Kyle's apartment, apparently celebrating their successful revelation. They were observed drinking champagne and making phone calls to what appeared to be divorce attorneys and real estate agents. They think they've won, Patricia observed as she delivered the latest surveillance report. Let them think that for a few more hours, Rob replied. Tomorrow, they're going to discover what losing actually feels like. That evening, Rob returned to his house one final time. He had arranged for a moving crew to pack his belongings and transfer them to a secure location. He would never again sleep under the same roof as the people who had betrayed him. The children were in their rooms, confused and traumatized by the day's events. Rob knocked on each door, speaking briefly with Emma, Tyler, and Sophie. He explained that he would always love them, but their mother's choices had made it impossible for their family to continue as it was. Emma, mature beyond her 15 years, asked the question Rob had been dreading. Are you going to try to get custody of us? Rob looked at this girl he had raised from birth, seen through every milestone and challenge, and felt his heart break all over again. I don't know, sweetheart. Legally, I have no rights. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and I will always be here if you need me. Amanda tried to intercept him as he left with his packed belongings, but Rob walked past her without acknowledgement. Kyle was nowhere to be seen, apparently having enough self-preservation instinct to avoid a direct confrontation. As Rob loaded his car, he noticed several neighbors watching from their windows. The Whitmore Griffin family had been pillars of the community, and news of their implosion would spread quickly through their social circles. This was exactly what Rob wanted: maximum visibility for Amanda's disgrace. The next morning, Amanda would wake up to discover that her comfortable world had been systematically dismantled during the night. Rob had spent 15 years building a life of security and stability. He would spend the next several months proving that he was equally skilled at destroying everything he had once protected. The war had begun, and Kyle Morrison was about to learn that he had chosen the wrong family to destroy. Chapter 5: The Systematic Dismantling. Dawn broke over Chicago as Rob implemented the first phase of his comprehensive revenge strategy. While Amanda and Kyle slept peacefully in what was still technically Rob's house, a series of carefully coordinated actions began to unravel their lives. At 6 a.m., federal agents raided Kyle's previous apartment based on evidence Rob had provided about his cybercrime activities. Kyle's former roommate, unaware that his internet had been used for identity theft and credit card fraud, was arrested along with 2 other men who had been unknowingly involved in Kyle's schemes. Simultaneously, Rob's attorney filed emergency motions with the Cook County Circuit Court. Amanda woke to find sheriff's deputies at her door with court orders freezing all joint bank accounts, credit cards, and investment portfolios. She was also served with a temporary restraining order requiring Kyle to vacate the premises within 24 hours. "What the hell is happening?" Kyle demanded as he read the legal documents over Amanda's shoulder. "Rob is happening," Amanda replied, her voice shaking as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "He's not just divorcing me. He's trying to destroy us." Amanda's first call was to the divorce attorney she had consulted weeks earlier. The lawyer's response was devastating. "Mrs. Griffin, given the evidence your husband has presented, my firm cannot represent you. There are clear conflicts of interest, and frankly, your position is legally untenable." 3 other attorneys gave Amanda similar responses. Rob's legal team had been busy since dawn, sharing just enough information with major family law firms to create conflicts of interest that would prevent Amanda from obtaining quality representation. Meanwhile, Kyle discovered that his mother's monthly support checks had been frozen. Dorothy Morrison had received a detailed package from a concerned family friend containing evidence of Kyle's criminal activities, his lies about his career, and photographs of him with multiple women. The elderly woman, heartbroken and humiliated, had immediately contacted her bank to stop all financial support. But Rob's most devastating move targeted Amanda's family directly. The Whitmore family had built their reputation over generations, maintaining an image of respectability that was essential to their social standing and business connections. Rob shattered that image with surgical precision. By 10 a.m., every member of Chicago's elite social circles had received an elegant package containing professionally printed photographs of Amanda and Kyle in compromising positions, along with a tastefully worded explanation of how Amanda had betrayed her family while using the Whitmore name to facilitate her deception. Amanda's father, Reginald Whitmore III, called her within an hour of receiving his package. "How could you do this to our family?" he demanded, his voice filled with more pain than anger. "The Whitmore name has been respected in this city for over a century. You've destroyed that in a single morning." "Daddy, I can explain." "There is no explanation that excuses this behavior, Amanda. You've humiliated your mother, disgraced our family, and betrayed a good man who loved you. Do not contact us again until you've found some way to repair the damage you've caused." The line went dead, severing Amanda's connection to the family wealth and social standing she had always taken for granted. Kyle fared even worse. Rob's investigation had revealed that Kyle was already on probation for his previous DUI conviction. The evidence of his cybercrime activities violated the terms of his probation, triggering an immediate arrest warrant. More damaging, Rob had shared Kyle's criminal history and current activities with Sarah Chun, Kyle's ex-girlfriend who had filed a restraining order against him. Sarah was now a prosecutor with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and she was very interested in finally building a case that would put Kyle behind bars. By noon, Kyle's photograph was circulating through Chicago's law enforcement network as a person of interest in multiple ongoing investigations. Every bar, gym, and social venue where Kyle had worked or spent time received visits from police officers asking questions about his activities and associates. Amanda tried to reach out to her friends for support, but discovered that Rob's morning package distribution had been thorough. Her closest friends were treating her like a social pariah, unwilling to risk their own reputations by associating with someone who had become the subject of scandalous gossip. The children, caught in the middle of this warfare, were experiencing their own trauma. Emma came home from school to find classmates whispering about her family's drama. Tyler was kicked off his baseball team when his coach decided the family situation was too much of a distraction. Sophie, too young to understand the complexity of the situation, kept asking when Daddy Rob was coming home. Amanda's attempts to explain were met with tears and confusion that broke what remained of Amanda's emotional stability. Kyle, meanwhile, was discovering that Rob's network of contacts extended far beyond what he had imagined. The bartending job Kyle had lined up for the weekend was suddenly unavailable when the bar owner received a visit from a security consultant who shared concerns about Kyle's background. The personal trainer certification Kyle used to find work was suspended pending an investigation into complaints about his conduct with female clients. These complaints, filed by women Rob's team, had located and encouraged to come forward, painted a picture of systematic predatory behavior. Most devastating of all, Kyle learned that Jennifer Walsh's suicide had left behind a detailed journal documenting his psychological abuse and financial manipulation. Her family had provided this journal to Rob's investigators, creating evidence that could support criminal charges beyond simple fraud. As the day progressed, Amanda and Kyle realized they were facing coordinated assault from multiple directions. Legal, financial, social, and psychological pressure was being applied simultaneously, creating a sense of helplessness that neither had experienced before. "We need to leave Chicago," Kyle told Amanda as they sat in her kitchen, surrounded by legal documents and facing an uncertain future. "Start over somewhere else." "With what money?" Amanda replied bitterly. "Rob has frozen everything. I can't even access my own checking account." "Then we'll figure something out. People bounce back from stuff like this all the time." Amanda looked at Kyle with growing clarity. For the first time, she was seeing him without the romantic filter that had clouded her judgment for years. He was a weak, selfish man who had led her into a disaster that was destroying everything she had built over 15 years of marriage. "This is your fault," she said quietly. "The DNA tests, the recording, the public humiliation, that was all your idea." Kyle's response revealed his true character. "You're the one who chose to cheat, Amanda. I just gave you the opportunity." As evening approached, Rob received status reports from all fronts of his campaign. Phase 1 had been executed flawlessly. Amanda was isolated. Kyle was facing multiple legal troubles, and their relationship was beginning to fracture under pressure. But Rob was just getting started. Phase 2 would target their ability to rebuild their lives anywhere, ensuring that their betrayal would follow them wherever they try to run. Patricia knocked on Rob's office door as he reviewed the day's accomplishments. "Kyle Morrison just contacted a bail bondsman. Looks like he's expecting to be arrested soon." Rob smiled grimly. "He's smarter than I thought, but not smart enough." Phase 2 would begin tomorrow, and by the end of the week, Amanda and Kyle would understand that crossing Rob Griffin had been the worst decision of their lives. Chapter 6: The Tightening Noose. 3 days after the birthday revelation, Amanda sat in a cramped studio apartment in Uptown, the only place she could afford with her frozen assets and destroyed reputation. Kyle had been arrested the previous evening on federal cybercrime charges, and Amanda was finally grasping the full scope of Rob's methodical destruction of their lives. The arrest had been particularly humiliating. Federal agents had waited until Kyle was leaving his favorite bar, where he had been loudly complaining to anyone who would listen about Rob's vindictive behavior. The arrest was conducted in full view of Kyle's social circle, ensuring maximum publicity for his downfall. Amanda's temporary attorney, a recent law school graduate who was the only lawyer willing to take her case, delivered devastating news during their morning meeting. "Mrs. Griffin, your husband's evidence is overwhelming," the young lawyer explained. "The DNA tests, the surveillance footage, the financial records, there's no defense strategy that could minimize your liability. Your best option is to accept whatever settlement offer he makes." "What kind of settlement?" Amanda asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Given the circumstances, you might receive minimal spousal support for a limited time period. The house, the savings, the investment accounts, all of that will likely go to your husband. And regarding custody of the children," Amanda's blood ran cold. "What about custody?" "Legally, Mr. Griffin has no parental rights since he's not the biological father. However, he's filed motions claiming that your adultery and deception constitute child endangerment. If successful, this could impact your custody arrangement with the biological father." The irony was devastating. Amanda had spent years planning to take Rob's money and children, only to discover that her betrayal had eliminated both possibilities. Meanwhile, Kyle was learning about Rob's reach from his jail cell. His cellmate, a career criminal named Marcus Williams, had an interesting story to share. "You picked the wrong guy to screw with," Marcus told Kyle during their first night together. "Word on the street, is that Griffin has connections with everyone from the FBI to the Chicago outfit. My cousin works security at the federal building, and he says your case has been fast-tracked. Kyle scoffed. He's just a private security guy. How much pull could he really have? Marcus laughed. You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you? Griffin Security Solutions handles protection for half the judges in this city, corporate investigations for major law firms, and consultation work for federal agencies. The man has files on everyone who matters in Chicago. The truth was more complex than Marcus understood, but not far from accurate. Rob had spent 2 decades building relationships with law enforcement, judiciary, and political figures. His firm's reputation for discretion and effectiveness had made him invaluable to powerful people who occasionally needed sensitive problems resolved. Now Rob was calling in those favors. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Kyle, had been a client of Griffin Security Solutions when her daughter received stalking threats from an ex-boyfriend. Rob's team had resolved the situation quietly and effectively. When Rob's attorney requested an expedited hearing for the divorce proceedings, Judge Morrison was happy to accommodate. FBI agent David Chun had worked with Rob on multiple cases involving corporate espionage and organized crime connections. When evidence of Kyle's cybercrime activities arrived on Agent Chun's desk, he personally ensured the case received immediate attention. Cook County State's Attorney Lisa Walsh was Jennifer Walsh's older sister. When she learned that Kyle Morrison was the man who had driven her sister to suicide, she made his prosecution a personal priority. Rob's network was extensive, legitimate, and now fully activated against Amanda and Kyle. But Rob's most devastating move was still to come. He had discovered that Kyle's trust fund money hadn't been lost to gambling debts, as Kyle claimed. Instead, Kyle had been systematically embezzling from his own family's charitable foundation, using forged documents and his mother's diminished mental capacity to cover his crimes. The Morrison Family Foundation had been providing scholarships to underprivileged children for over 30 years. Kyle's theft had affected hundreds of families, making his crimes both personal and public. When this information was released to the media, Kyle's case transformed from a simple fraud investigation into a major news story. Amanda watched the evening news in horror as Kyle's mugshot appeared on screen, accompanied by reports about his theft from children's scholarships and his history of targeting wealthy women. The story painted her as either a willing accomplice or a pathetic victim, neither of which helped her situation. The social destruction was complete. Amanda's former friends actively avoided her, crossing streets to prevent accidental encounters. Her children were experiencing constant harassment at school, with classmates asking invasive questions about their real father and their mother's affair. Emma, showing maturity beyond her years, confronted Amanda directly. "Mom, you need to fix this," the 15-year-old said. "Tyler is getting into fights every day, Sophie cries herself to sleep, and everyone at school treats us like we're criminals. I'm trying, sweetheart, but..." "No, you're not trying. You're sitting here feeling sorry for yourself while our lives fall apart." Rob, Dad, whatever I'm supposed to call him now, he raised us for 15 years. He was there for every game, every school play, every time we were sick. And you destroyed that for what? For Kyle. Emma's words cut deeper than any legal document or financial penalty. Amanda was confronting the reality that her choices had devastated not just her marriage, but her children's entire sense of identity and security. Kyle, meanwhile, was discovering that jail was just the beginning of his problems. Word of his crimes had spread through the facility, and inmates had little tolerance for men who stole from children and elderly women. His requests for protective custody were denied due to overcrowding issues, a situation Rob's contacts in the system had quietly arranged. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. Amanda found herself calling Rob repeatedly, but his number had been changed. His assistant Patricia answered calls to his business line with professional courtesy, but made it clear that Mr. Griffin was not available for personal communications. Amanda's attempts to reach out through mutual friends were equally unsuccessful. Rob had systematically contacted everyone in their social circle, providing just enough information to ensure Amanda was ostracized without creating legal liability for defamation. By the end of the week, Amanda realized that Kyle's suggestion to leave Chicago was no longer optional. It was essential for survival. But Kyle was facing federal charges that would prevent him from traveling, and Amanda had no resources to start over anywhere else. The final blow came when Amanda received notification that her temporary housing was being terminated. The landlord had received complaints from other tenants about criminal activity and media attention. Amanda was given 48 hours to vacate. With nowhere to turn, Amanda made the most difficult decision of her life. She called Rob's attorney and requested a meeting to discuss settlement terms. Mrs. Griffin, Martin Kellerman said when they met the next morning, "My client is prepared to be remarkably generous under the circumstances." Amanda listened as the attorney outlined Rob's offer. She would receive $2,000 per month in spousal support for exactly 2 years. She would have no claim to any marital assets, property, or investments. She would be required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, preventing her from discussing the marriage or divorce publicly. Most importantly, she would agree to cooperate in Kyle's prosecution and provide testimony about his criminal activities. "And if I refuse?" Amanda asked. "Then my client will pursue civil litigation for fraud, theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Based on our calculations, you could be liable for damages exceeding $1 million. Additionally, we would share our evidence with Child Protective Services, potentially impacting your custody of the children." Amanda realized she had no choice. Rob had constructed a perfect trap, offering her just enough to survive while ensuring she could never rebuild the life she had destroyed. As she signed the settlement documents, Amanda understood that Rob's revenge was more sophisticated than simple punishment. He had methodically eliminated every advantage she thought she possessed, every resource she had counted on, and every relationship she valued. Kyle would spend the next several years in federal prison. Amanda would spend the rest of her life as a cautionary tale about the consequences of betraying a man who had dedicated his career to protecting others from threats exactly like the one she had become. Rob Griffin had proven that the most dangerous enemy is the one who builds trust professionally and applies that expertise personally when betrayed. Chapter 7. The Final Judgment. 2 weeks after Amanda signed the settlement agreement, Kyle Morrison's federal trial began with media attention that exceeded even Rob's expectations. The case had captured public interest because it combined romance scandal with child exploitation, creating a perfect storm of social outrage. Rob attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with the composed demeanor of a man watching justice unfold exactly as planned. His presence was a constant reminder to Kyle of the scope and precision of his downfall. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chun, who had recused herself from the case due to personal history but provided guidance to her colleague, presented overwhelming evidence of Kyle's crimes. Bank records, digital forensics, and witness testimony painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning nearly 5 years. Amanda was called as a prosecution witness, forced to testify about Kyle's admissions regarding his criminal activities. Under oath, she revealed conversations where Kyle had bragged about his ability to manipulate marks and described his theft from the Morrison Family Foundation as borrowing from stupid kids who wouldn't miss it. Kyle's defense attorney, a public defender overwhelmed by the evidence, could only argue for reduced sentencing based on Kyle's difficult childhood and substance abuse issues. The strategy backfired when the prosecution presented evidence that Kyle had fabricated most of his sob story, including claims about an abusive father who had actually died heroically while serving as a firefighter. The most damaging testimony came from Kyle's previous victims. Rob's investigators had located 6 women whom Kyle had systematically defrauded over the past decade. Their stories revealed a pattern of predatory behavior that went far beyond simple financial crimes. Jennifer Walsh's sister, Lisa, delivered victim impact testimony that left the courtroom in stunned silence. She described finding Jennifer's body, reading her sister's journal documenting Kyle's psychological abuse, and living with the knowledge that her sister's death could have been prevented if Kyle's pattern had been exposed earlier. Kyle Morrison is a predator who destroys families for sport, Lisa testified. He doesn't just steal money. He steals hope, trust, and in my sister's case, the will to live. Rob had orchestrated every aspect of the trial's coverage, ensuring that Kyle's conviction would be both legally complete and socially devastating. Local news outlets received regular updates about the proceedings, with particular emphasis on Kyle's theft from children's scholarships and his role in Jennifer Walsh's suicide. The trial lasted 6 days. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and racketeering. Kyle Morrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. As Kyle was led away in shackles, he looked directly at Rob for the first time since the birthday revelation. The expression on Kyle's face was pure hatred mixed with grudging respect for an adversary who had outplayed him completely. Amanda watched from the gallery as the man she had sacrificed her family for was reduced to a number in the federal prison system. The reality of her situation crystallized. She had destroyed 15 years of marriage for a criminal who was now permanently removed from her life. But Rob wasn't finished with Amanda. Following Kyle's conviction, Rob implemented the final phase of his revenge strategy. He had been quietly building a case for custodial interference, arguing that Amanda's deception about the children's paternity constituted child abuse that warranted state intervention. The argument was legally complex but emotionally compelling. By lying about their biological father's identity, Amanda had deprived Emma, Tyler, and Sophie of their true family heritage while forcing them to maintain relationships based on false pretenses. Child Protective Services, armed with evidence Rob had provided, opened an investigation into Amanda's fitness as a parent. The investigation revealed concerning patterns: the children's behavioral problems since the revelation, their academic performance decline, and their expressed confusion about their identity and family relationships. Emma, now 16 and legally able to express her preferences, requested to remain with Rob despite the lack of biological connection. Tyler and Sophie, interviewed by court-appointed advocates, consistently expressed distress about their mother's deception and uncertainty about their future. The biological father, Kyle Morrison, was obviously unavailable to provide care from federal prison. His family, devastated by the revelation of his crimes and the destruction of their charitable foundation, wanted no involvement with his children. Rob's attorneys argued that he had been the children's de facto father for their entire lives, providing emotional and financial support while developing authentic parent-child relationships. Amanda's deception, they contended, should not be allowed to punish the children by severing their connection to the only father they had ever known. The custody hearing was unlike anything Amanda had experienced during the divorce proceedings. Instead of facing Rob's legal team, she was confronting child welfare advocates, family court psychologists, and her own children's expressed preferences. Emma testified on her own behalf, requesting continued contact with Rob while expressing anger toward her mother for lying about everything that mattered. Tyler, now 13 and deeply confused about his identity, told the court he wanted to maintain relationships with both Rob and Amanda, but needed time to understand who he really was. Sophie, too young for formal testimony, was interviewed by child psychologists who reported that she consistently referred to Rob as Daddy and expressed anxiety about living with Amanda without understanding why. The court's decision was unprecedented but legally sound. While Rob had no biological claim to the children, his role as their primary father figure for 15 years created a compelling interest in maintaining those relationships. Amanda would retain legal custody, but Rob was granted extensive visitation rights and shared decision-making authority for major life decisions. More damaging to Amanda, the court ordered comprehensive family therapy and parenting classes, with the understanding that future custody arrangements would depend on Amanda's ability to address the psychological harm her deception had caused. Rob had achieved something remarkable. Despite having no biological relationship to the children, he had secured legal recognition as their father while ensuring Amanda would spend years proving her fitness as a parent. The final insult came when Amanda realized the financial implications of the custody arrangement. Rob's settlement offer had been calculated to provide minimal support, while the court order required him to continue contributing to the children's expenses he could control through his decision-making authority. Amanda was receiving $2,000 per month, while Rob maintained financial influence over the children's lives, creating a permanent reminder of her dependence on his generosity. 6 months after the birthday revelation, Amanda found herself living in a modest apartment in a distant suburb, working as a receptionist for a small business, and seeing her children according to a schedule determined by court order and Rob's availability. Kyle Morrison was serving his federal sentence while facing additional state charges related to the Morrison Family Foundation theft. His earliest possible release date was more than a decade away. Rob had returned to his successful business, purchased a new home in a prestigious neighborhood, and maintained active relationships with the children he had raised. His reputation, far from being damaged by the scandal, was enhanced by his measured response to betrayal and his commitment to the children's welfare. Emma chose to spend most of her time with Rob, effectively living with him while maintaining minimal contact with Amanda. Tyler split his time more evenly, but clearly looked to Rob for guidance and support. Sophie, still young enough to adapt, gradually adjusted to the new arrangement while maintaining love for both parental figures. The social consequences for Amanda were permanent. Her former friends treated her as a cautionary tale. Her family maintained distant but disapproving contact, and potential romantic partners were deterred by the dramatic circumstances of her divorce. Rob had proven that revenge could be both comprehensive and legal, both devastating and morally justified. He had protected himself, punished his betrayers, and secured his relationship with the children he loved, all while maintaining his reputation and professional standing. Amanda learned too late that destroying the life of a man whose profession was protecting others from destruction was not just unwise, it was impossible. Rob Griffin had spent 20 years preparing for threats, and when the threat came from within his own family, his response was everything his enemies should have expected and everything his former wife never saw coming. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. 1 year after the birthday revelation, Amanda sat in her cramped apartment reviewing the wreckage of her life with the clarity that only comes from complete defeat. The anniversary had passed without acknowledgement from anyone. Not the children, not her family, and certainly not Kyle, who was now serving his sentence in a federal facility in downstate Illinois. Her job as a medical office receptionist provided just enough income to cover her basic expenses, but the work was mindless and unfulfilling compared to her previous life as an affluent suburban housewife. Every day was a reminder of what she had lost: financial security, social standing, and most painfully, her children's respect and trust. Emma, now 17, had effectively severed their relationship. The teenager lived with Rob full-time, visiting Amanda only when court-ordered and maintaining cold, formal interactions that broke Amanda's heart. Emma's college applications listed Rob as her father, and she had legally petitioned to change her last name from Morrison back to Griffin. "You stole 15 years of my life by lying about who I was," Emma had told Amanda during their last meaningful conversation. "I don't know how to forgive that, and I don't know if I want to try." Tyler, now 14, was slightly more forgiving but remained deeply confused about his identity. He split his time between Amanda and Rob according to the court order, but Amanda could see that he viewed Rob as his real father regardless of biology. Tyler had started therapy to deal with his anger and confusion, and progress was slow. Sophie, now 9, had adapted with the resilience of childhood, but still asked uncomfortable questions that Amanda struggled to answer. "Why did you lie about Daddy Rob?" was a frequent refrain that never got easier to hear. Rob, meanwhile, had thrived in the aftermath of the scandal. His business had expanded significantly, partly due to the publicity surrounding his methodical handling of personal betrayal. Corporate clients appreciated working with a man who had demonstrated both discretion and effectiveness under extreme pressure. He had also begun dating Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a pediatric psychologist who specialized in family trauma. Helen had been recommended by the court to help the children adjust to their new reality, and her professional relationship with Rob had gradually evolved into something personal. Amanda learned about Rob's new relationship through social media posts shared by mutual friends who seemed determined to keep her informed of his happiness. The photos showed Rob and Helen at charity galas, Cubs games, and family dinners with the children, a new family unit that had formed around the ashes of Amanda's old life. The most painful images were those showing the children's obvious comfort with Helen. Emma hugged her in photos, Tyler sought her advice about school projects, and Sophie had started drawing pictures that included Dr. Helen as a permanent family member. Kyle's situation had deteriorated beyond Amanda's worst expectations. The federal conviction had been followed by state charges related to his theft from the Morrison Family Foundation. His mother had died while he was awaiting trial, some said from heartbreak over her son's crimes, leaving Kyle with no family support or financial resources. More damaging, Kyle had been attacked twice by fellow inmates who viewed child exploitation as unforgivable. His requests for protective custody had been denied due to administrative constraints that Amanda suspected were influenced by Rob's law enforcement connections. Kyle's letters to Amanda, smuggled out through other inmates' legal correspondence, painted a picture of a broken man facing the reality of his choices. He begged Amanda to visit, to put money in his commissary account, to provide some connection to the outside world. Amanda had visited Kyle exactly once, 6 months after his sentencing. The experience was horrifying. Kyle had lost significant weight. His arrogance had been replaced by desperate paranoia, and he spent their brief conversation begging her to find ways to appeal his conviction. "This is all your husband's fault," Kyle had insisted. "He set me up, manipulated the evidence, bought off the prosecutors. You have to help me prove it." Amanda realized during that visit that Kyle would never accept responsibility for his actions. Even facing 12 years in prison, he blamed everyone except himself for the consequences of his crimes. She never visited again. The most devastating aspect of Amanda's situation was her complete isolation. Her parents maintained minimal contact, sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts, but declining invitations to visit or spend time together. Her siblings had effectively written her off, viewing her actions as an embarrassment to the family name. Her former friends had moved on, creating new social circles that deliberately excluded her. The few people who still spoke to Amanda did so with a mixture of pity and fascination, treating her like a cautionary tale rather than a human being deserving of compassion. Amanda had tried dating through online apps, but potential partners inevitably discovered her history through internet searches. The combination of adultery, deception, and association with a convicted criminal made her radioactive in the dating market. The psychological toll was immense. Amanda spent hours replaying the decisions that had led to her downfall, trying to understand how she had mistaken Kyle's manipulation for love and Rob's devotion for oppression. Therapy helped somewhat, but progress was slow when every day brought fresh reminders of her losses. The children's academic and social success under Rob's guidance was particularly painful. Emma had been accepted to Northwestern University with Rob's support and encouragement. Tyler was excelling in baseball and had started showing interest in his father's security business. Sophie was thriving in her new school and had made friends who knew nothing about the family's complicated history. Amanda realized that her children were better off without her constant presence. This recognition was both liberating and devastating. She had sacrificed everything for an affair that had ultimately proven worthless, while the family she had abandoned was flourishing in her absence. The legal system continued to favor Rob's position. When Amanda requested modifications to the visitation schedule or custody arrangement, the courts consistently ruled in favor of maintaining stability for the children. Rob's documentation of every interaction, every missed visit, and every instance of the children's expressed preferences created an unassailable record. Amanda's attorney, her third since the divorce, had been blunt about her prospects. "Mrs. Morrison, you have no leverage in this situation. Mr. Griffin holds all the cards legally, financially, and emotionally. My advice is to focus on rebuilding your relationship with your children slowly and accepting that your previous life is never coming back." On the first anniversary of the birthday revelation, Amanda received an unexpected package. Inside was a photo album containing pictures from the children's first year under the new arrangement. The images showed school plays, birthday parties, family vacations, and everyday moments of happiness. A note from Rob was included. "Amanda, I wanted you to see that the children are thriving. They ask about you often, and I encourage them to maintain contact when they're ready. I hope you're finding peace with your new life. Rob." The gesture was simultaneously kind and cruel, showing Amanda everything she had lost while demonstrating Rob's complete victory over their conflict. He was secure enough in his position to offer occasional generosity, while she remained dependent on his goodwill for any meaningful relationship with her children. Amanda understood that this was her life now, permanently diminished, socially isolated, and financially struggling. While watching from a distance, as the family she had destroyed rebuilt itself around her absence. Rob Griffin had proven that some betrayals carry consequences that extend far beyond legal proceedings or financial settlements. He had created a situation where Amanda would spend the rest of her life paying for her choices, while he and the children moved forward into a future that no longer included her in any meaningful way. The perfect betrayal had met the perfect revenge, and Amanda was learning that some victories are so complete they eliminate any possibility of redemption or recovery. Chapter 9. The New Dynasty. 5 years after the birthday revelation, Rob stood in his new home office overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing quarterly reports for Griffin Security Solutions. The company had grown exponentially, now employing over 200 people and maintaining offices in 6 major cities. His reputation for handling sensitive situations with ruthless efficiency had made him the go-to consultant for high-profile individuals facing complex security threats. The wall behind his desk displayed framed photographs that told the story of his reconstructed life. Emma graduating as valedictorian from Northwestern, Tyler accepting a baseball scholarship to the University of Illinois, Sophie performing in her school's theater production. Interspersed among these were images of family vacations, holiday celebrations, and quiet moments that captured the genuine happiness Rob had built from the ashes of his former marriage. At 47, Rob had aged well. The stress lines from the betrayal years had been replaced by the confident bearing of a man who had faced his worst nightmare and emerged stronger. His relationship with Helen had evolved into a partnership that combined professional respect with genuine affection. They had married 18 months earlier in a ceremony attended by the children, selected friends, and colleagues who had supported Rob through his darkest period. Helen, now 39, had brought her own strength to their relationship. As a pediatric psychologist, she understood the complexities of blended families and had helped the children navigate their conflicted feelings about their unconventional situation. Her presence had provided stability and emotional intelligence that complemented Rob's protective instincts. The children had adapted remarkably well to their new reality. Emma, now 22, worked as a forensic analyst for the FBI's Chicago field office, a career choice clearly influenced by her adoptive father's work. She maintained minimal contact with Amanda, sending obligatory birthday and Christmas cards, but declining invitations for extended visits. Tyler, 18 and about to start college, had legally changed his name to Tyler Griffin and asked Rob to adopt him formally. The process had been complicated by Amanda's initial objections, but Tyler's passionate testimony about Rob being his real father in every way that matters had swayed the court. Tyler planned to study criminal justice and eventually join Griffin Security Solutions. Sophie, now 13, was the most emotionally complex of the 3 children. She maintained regular contact with Amanda, but clearly viewed Rob and Helen as her primary family unit. Sophie's adjustment had been carefully managed through therapy and consistent support, allowing her to maintain relationships with both sides of her fractured family. Amanda's life had stabilized at a level far below her previous circumstances, but adequate for basic survival. She worked as an office manager for a small nonprofit organization, lived in a modest apartment, and had developed a small circle of friends who knew nothing about her past. Her contact with the children had settled into a predictable pattern. Occasional phone calls, supervised visits during school breaks, and formal events like graduations where her presence was tolerated but not celebrated. Kyle Morrison had served 3 years of his federal sentence when he was found dead in his cell, the victim of what prison officials described as suicide, but other inmates claimed was murder. Kyle's death had briefly reopened media attention on the case, but public interest quickly faded. Amanda attended his funeral alone, joined only by Kyle's elderly aunt who remained unaware of the full scope of his crimes. Kyle's death had eliminated any possibility of future complications regarding the children's paternity. While Amanda remained their legal mother, Kyle's criminal history and violent end had erased any romantic notions about their true father that the children might have entertained. Rob's business success had created opportunities for strategic philanthropy that helped repair the damage caused by the scandal. Griffin Security Solutions established a scholarship fund for children of single mothers, partnered with domestic violence prevention organizations, and provided pro bono security services for at-risk families. The Morrison Family Foundation, decimated by Kyle's theft, had been reconstituted with Rob's financial support and oversight. The foundation now provided scholarships specifically for children from broken homes, turning Kyle's crimes into a source of genuine help for vulnerable families. Rob's relationship with Amanda had evolved into cold but functional civility. They communicated primarily through Helen, who served as an unofficial mediator for issues involving the children. Amanda had learned to accept Rob's complete victory with grudging respect for his strategic brilliance. During their last direct conversation at Emma's college graduation, Amanda had finally acknowledged the scope of her defeat. "You destroyed me completely," she had told Rob during a brief, private moment. "You destroyed yourself," Rob had replied. "I just made sure you understood the consequences. Do you ever regret how far you went?" Amanda had asked. Rob had considered the question seriously before answering. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret protecting my children from the chaos you and Kyle created." The conversation had ended there, with both participants understanding that their conflict was permanently resolved in Rob's favor. Rob's success had attracted attention from former military colleagues and law enforcement officials who recognized his unique combination of strategic thinking and operational effectiveness. He had been quietly recruited to consult on national security matters, providing his expertise to government agencies facing complex threats. This work remained classified, but Helen understood that Rob's influence extended far beyond corporate security. He had become part of an informal network of specialists who protected American interests from sophisticated adversaries, a natural evolution of his talent for neutralizing threats. The children's success provided Rob with his greatest satisfaction. Emma's work with the FBI had led to several high-profile arrests, establishing her as a rising star in federal law enforcement. Tyler's athletic and academic achievements had earned him opportunities that would have been impossible in his previous environment. Sophie's artistic talents were flourishing under Helen's encouragement and Rob's support. Rob had created more than just a new family. He had built a dynasty. The Griffin name now represented success, integrity, and the kind of principled strength that attracted respect from peers and adversaries alike. His business empire provided financial security for multiple generations, while his children were positioned to continue his legacy in their chosen fields. Amanda's betrayal, intended to destroy Rob's life, had instead catalyzed his transformation into something far more powerful than he had been as a suburban family man. The experience had stripped away his naive trust while preserving his capacity for love and loyalty toward those who deserved it. On quiet evenings, Rob sometimes reflected on the path that had brought him to this point. The birthday revelation had been intended as his destruction, but it had instead revealed capabilities and connections he never knew he possessed. Amanda and Kyle had awakened a sleeping giant, and their complete destruction had been the inevitable result. Rob Griffin had learned that the most effective revenge is not just punishment, it's transformation. He had taken his enemy's attempt to destroy him and used it as fuel for building something greater than what they had tried to tear down. Amanda lived with the daily knowledge that her betrayal had not just cost her everything she valued. It had made her former husband immeasurably stronger, more successful, and happier than he had ever been with her. Kyle Morrison was dead, unmourned and unremembered, except as a cautionary tale about the consequences of underestimating the wrong man. And Rob Griffin stood at the center of a new empire, surrounded by people who loved and respected him, having proven that some men respond to betrayal not with weakness, but with the kind of ruthless strength that rebuilds the world according to their own vision. The perfect betrayal had indeed met the perfect revenge, and the revenge had won so completely that even the memory of the original conflict was fading into irrelevance. Rob had not just survived Amanda's attempt to destroy him. He had used her betrayal as the foundation for creating something infinitely better than what she had tried to take away. In the end, Amanda and Kyle had given Rob the greatest gift possible. They had shown him exactly how strong he could become when everything he thought he could trust was stripped away. And Rob Griffin had proven that a man who builds his life on the assumption that everyone is a potential threat is very difficult to surprise and impossible to defeat. Epilogue. 10 years after the birthday revelation, Amanda received a wedding invitation in her modest apartment. Emma Griffin was marrying a fellow FBI agent, and the ceremony would be held at Rob's lakefront estate. Amanda was invited as a courtesy, with the understanding that her attendance was optional and her role would be minimal. She sat in the back row during the ceremony, watching her eldest daughter marry a man who clearly adored her, in a setting that represented everything Amanda had lost. Rob walked Emma down the aisle, his pride evident as he fulfilled the role that biology said belonged to someone else, but circumstances had awarded to him. Helen stood beside Tyler and Sophie in the front row, the four of them representing the family unit that had risen from the ashes of Amanda's destructive choices. During the reception, Amanda observed the celebration from the periphery, noting how happy and successful her children had become under Rob's guidance. The contrast with her own diminished circumstances was painful but undeniable. As the evening concluded, Rob approached Amanda's table. After 10 years, he looked distinguished and confident, wearing success with the ease of a man who had earned everything he possessed. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "It meant something to Emma to have you here." Amanda nodded, understanding that this moment represented the final closure of their conflict. Rob had won so completely that he could afford to be gracious to the woman who had once tried to destroy him. "She's beautiful," Amanda said, looking toward Emma as she danced with her new husband. "They all turned out so well." "Yes, they did," Rob agreed. "Despite everything, they turned out perfectly." The emphasis on "despite everything" was Rob's final reminder that Amanda's children had succeeded not because of her influence, but in spite of her betrayal. It was a gentle but unmistakable assertion of his complete victory. Amanda left the reception early, driving back to her small apartment with the knowledge that she had witnessed the final chapter of a story that had ended exactly as it should have. Rob Griffin had built something beautiful from the wreckage of her destructive choices, and her children were living proof that some men respond to betrayal by becoming better than their enemies ever imagined possible. The perfect betrayal had met the perfect revenge, and 10 years later, the revenge continued to pay dividends in the form of love, success, and the kind of happiness that can only be earned through surviving the worst that life can offer. Rob Griffin had proven that the strongest men are forged in the fires of betrayal, and that the most devastating response to being torn down is to rebuild yourself into something your enemies could never destroy. Amanda Morrison learned too late that destroying a protector only works if you can ensure he never gets the chance to protect himself. She had awakened something in Rob Griffin that she never knew existed and spent the rest of her life paying the price for her miscalculation. In the end, the only winners were the children who gained a father strong enough to shield them from the consequences of their mother's choices, and Rob Griffin, who discovered that his capacity for strategic thinking and operational excellence extended far beyond his professional life. The betrayal was perfect, but the revenge was eternal. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.